Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Well, hello. Welcome in to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. My name is Kyle Borganoni, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's pronounced Matthew Betz.
That is correct. Not to be confused with Betts, also pronounced Betz. Yeah, man, here we are. This is a super fun show that I'm excited to talk about. I think we might get into a fight tonight. I'm not really sure, or we'll just agree on everything and be best friends. But yeah, best ball rankings discrepancy show on the pod today. So excited, man. And it's Friday, and we got a 3-day weekend ahead of us, and the UDK launches on June 1st. Like, just there's so many good things happening. So I'm excited, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's definitely disagree. I don't mind disagreeing with anyone because it's totally okay. It's part of life. And with our best ball rankings bets that you and I are going to have live in the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus, part of the DFS Pass, there are some discrepancies that you and I have. So we will get to talk about those on the show. This is DFS for the rest of us. If this is the first time that you're listening to our show, welcome in wherever you are. We know that most listeners, we've polled our audiences, and by polled them, Betz and I have talked about this before. We assume that you're in the car or on the toilet, right?
Or the other one in season last year was on the run. So either running on the toilet or in the car. You can't be anywhere else. And if you are, pause it and then go to those three places, and then you can listen again.
I could just see people. They're like, I'm just at my desk, like, or I'm just
I'm
at
walking
home.
the dog. Is that okay? No, it's not.
So we're glad you're with us. But for us, DFS can be super complicated. Best ball can be super complicated. And so Betz and I want to walk you through some of the strategies, the way to think about best ball in a way that can be profitable and it's just fun. Like, best ball season is super fun. We're in the heat of the summer, you know. Betz, I mean, what did you mowed the lawn today, right?
I did. You would think, it's late May, it's Memorial Day. You could be outside in a tank top. No, I was outside in a sweatshirt because it was in the 50s here today in Vermont, which is where I live. It was so hot, like, the last 2 or 3 days, and all of a sudden now it's going to be cool this weekend. So not the best weather, but it's better than being insanely hot. Like, if I had a choice, I would rather be cold, which is why I live in Vermont. I could not live in Arizona where the guys live. How do you live your life every single day in 100 degrees? I could not even fathom. So
how do you live with yourself?
Team cold weather over here.
So, but the real question is, were you listening to the DFS podcast while you were here?
Yes, I was.
Nice. Just that's it. Monica, your wife knows, hey, we only listen to this podcast at all times in our house. I hear myself 10 times through. That's how it goes.
And just to help our stats, I listen on every platform. Once on Apple, once on Spotify, then I'm over on Stitcher. I'm just everywhere.
Dude, MySpace, those listens aren't what they used to be, but we're trying to up those as well. But
no, it's sad. Some listeners might not even know what MySpace is.
Well, you know what? We can explain. We should probably have a tutorial. That's where we're going to expand next, is to talk about the history of the internet. Explain how it works, which I could not tell you at all. But how about this, Betz? Speaking of the internet, what a great transition, right?
Pro move.
Speaking of the internet, I want to talk about our DFS Pass. And for our quick question, let's do some highlights last year. Maybe our favorite moments of what we did DFS this past year in 2020 of listeners. So not us, Betz. So not me and you, but listeners. What were the things that they gave feedback about that actually won them money? So you want to start us off with an example?
I've got a couple that come to mind because honestly, man, and I really don't want to sound like tooting our own horn by saying this, but we had a lot of success with people reaching out to us last year being like, wow, like, great call this week, or, nice job on that one. Like, didn't think of that. Really good advice, things like that. So it was really good to hear. And that's the best part of doing this, is to be to help you guys, the listeners, make some money, right? That's why we're playing DFS, and for the fun and the sweat. But when it comes down to it, nothing better than cashing. One awesome kind of thing that stuck out from last year in terms of the DFS Pass specifically, I read up the Thursday Night Football Showdown slate, which is just a different animal compared to what the normal main slate is. And I remember someone reached out to me It was the week against the Saints where Mike Williams just went absolutely bananas last year, and I wrote him up as a great captain choice just to be contrarian in tournaments, and it worked out. So that was one fun call from last year, and I'm glad someone made a lot of money on it. I kind of wish it was me.
One of my favorite moments, which was painful for me, was I was at the beach one week. Do you remember this, Betz? I recorded at the beach. And
you were like in a closet.
I was in a closet, and honestly, like, I just couldn't give my full attention to DFS that week because I was with my family. And so I wrote up my articles. I knew I was going to record with you, but like, I just couldn't give the same attention to my own lineups. And so I think I cashed that week, but at the end of the day, like, I just couldn't give the same vigor with family and stuff like that. But in the pace of play article, I wrote up Derek Carr and Chase Claypool, who at the time, Chase Claypool had really done nothing that year, as some of my favorite dart throws that week. And Carr and Claypool ended up being the quarterback one and the wide receiver one that week. And Claypool was that week that he went off for 4 touchdowns. And, you know, here's a screenshot that I put in our show doc, but someone said they built their lineup around guys that we suggested in the Millie Maker. This guy put in $40 bets and he won 15,000. Like, he's going to mail some of that to us, right?
I would assume so. I think that's how this thing works. That's what I was told anyway.
Yeah. So basically in the DFS Pass, we get to write up some of our favorite dart throws. And so someone finished 7th overall. We had someone else that got 10th in the FanDuel Millie Maker. And he literally said, I listened to the podcast. I took your exact picks from the DFS Pass. And that's what I went with. So we're not trying to say that all of our picks are perfect. There's a process for all of us. But, you know, for a really, really cheap price right now, you can get it before June 1st. You can get the DFS Pass. And you get it for $40 cheaper than what it's going to be at full price. So right now it's $50 to get the UDK Plus, and we think it's a crazy awesome deal. You can actually return that in just 1 week in the way that we teach cash. So we think it's a sweet deal. But anything else you want to add, Betz?
Yeah, just to add to how good that deal is. Again, it's by June 1st. So by the time you're listening, it might be Saturday of this weekend, Sunday, Monday on Memorial Day. Like, you have 1 day to do this. For the price that it is, I calculated it out, it's $6.25 per month because we go through the Super Bowl. Kyle and I are out here grinding 2-game slates, 3-game slates, the showdown slate, player props, etc., all the way through February. So if you're getting this thing now, you're getting obviously all the amazing content from Andy, Mike, and Jason in the UDK, and obviously we're putting in work behind the scenes for that too. But now you're getting this for $6 a month. I mean, it's like, I like Andy, Mike, and Jason, but they're kind of idiots for offering at this low price. It's so silly. Unbelievable value. Go scoop it up.
Yeah, and I always tell people, my wife, she asks about fantasy football, and, you know, I have a couple of leagues where, you know, the buy-in's like $100. Like, but I'm like, I get 4 months worth of entertainment for $100. Like, that's pretty wild.
What a deal.
That you can say that.
Man.
So basically, Betz, are you saying if people want to hang out with us for $6 a month for the next like 6 months? I mean,
we're cheaper than Netflix. That's all I'm saying.
Whoa, well, that's going to be the new tagline, and I feel like that's going to take us places. So thank 100%. You for that marketing pitch that was carefully crafted. I really appreciate it. But you can go online at ultimatedraftkit.com. You can follow Betz and I on Twitter. Betz is at the Fantasy PT. He has more followers than myself, and I'm okay with that because you give really good injury analysis, and I think you're better at Twitter than I am.
Well, you know, like when your mom follows you and your uncle and your aunt and cousins, like, it adds up quick. So, you know, that's one way to do it for sure.
You can follow me at Kyle_Borg. You can follow the Ballers, of course, at the FF Ballers. So, yeah, we're going to talk today about best ball rankings and some of our discrepancies. So, Betz, why don't we get into this?
Best Ball Bonanza.
Wouldn't that drop awesome, Betz? The best ball bonanza.
It's one of my favorites.
It is a personal favorite. So today, Betz and I are going to go through a couple of best ball rankings discrepancies. We're going to talk through some players at each position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, that we have either a differing opinion on between the two of us or between ADP. So we use Underdog ADP. That's where we play, but I also play a little bit on DraftKings. DraftKings has best ball as well, but we're going to be talking about Underdog ADP, and our rankings are also found in the UDK Plus. So that's what we're going to be going off of here. But Betz, I want you to start us off with arguably the best hairy-chested man in the league, and that's our boy, Ryan Joseph Fitzpatrick.
Yes, confirmed. The best chest hair in the league by far. Also the best beard. I mean, we're talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick here, and the reason I have him on the show, Doc, is because I am much higher than consensus in terms of rankings for Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you listen to our last couple of shows, you've heard that I'm pretty bullish on Washington to win the NFC East. I'm also bullish on them to go out and win at least 8.5 games, depending on which line you got when you bet it. Hopefully you did. And if that happens, they're not going to turn away from Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has the lowest probability, in my opinion, of getting benched at this point in his career with this team and the way the depth chart is currently unfolding. We've seen over the course of time, is it Jameis Winston with the Bucs or is it Fitzpatrick? And they kind of went in back and forth. And we've seen that over the years through Fitz's career. But he is locked in to be this team's starter. And you were getting him currently at 152 and Underdog ADP. Basically, the quarterback 21. So you don't even need him to be that good at his price for this to pay off. I love Fitzpatrick, man. You look at his last 20 starts, going back to 2019. His average finish, the quarterback 12.9, aka almost a quarterback 1 on average. In that time span, he's got 12 top 10 weeks going back to those 20 starts. So he has ceiling, and we've seen that before. Good weapons, and obviously Antonio Gibson. I freaking love Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel's really exciting here entering this system with Scott Turner at OC. And the thing I like about Fitz the most is not only is he going to be elevated, but you're looking at this entire stack situation. Like, you can stack all these guys if you want to. Well, maybe not all of them, but you can stack a couple of them if you want to. You can get Fitz at an affordable price. Gibson isn't too expensive. He's a running back 2. Terry McLaurin is at wide receiver 13, etc. Go down the board to Curtis Samuel, De'Ami Brown, Logan Thomas. There's just a lot of ways that you can get creative here if you're stacking to create upside. And to me, of the quarterbacks that don't run the football, Ryan Fitzpatrick at this ADP probably has more upside than any quarterback going after him in draft. So absolutely love him at the price that he's at right now.
Yeah, at ADP, he's 152, which is 13th, 14th round, depending on when that happens. So it's hard to argue against that, like anybody that's that late in a draft. Can I give the counter argument, sir?
Definitely not.
So is there any fear, just to be honest, with Fitzpatrick not playing the full 17 games?
Not really. I just, like looking at the situation, the only way that it happens is if like the defense props up the team and then he kind of falls off and he's letting them down. And then they say, okay, like we need to make a switch. But I just don't see that happening based off the fact that, currently it's Taylor Heineke is their quarterback 2. Like, he played one playoff game and played all right. I don't know. I mean, it seems like the most secure situation that he's had, but certainly he's erratic and he has turnovers and things like that. And if the coaching staff says, all right, man, your chest hair is sweet, but those turnovers are not, then we need to make a switch. So that definitely is in the realm of possibility for sure.
Yeah. So if you are building a stack, or let's just say you're building a roster, I'm assuming Fitzpatrick is your quarterback 2 or 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. At this point, I mean, the way I approach quarterback in general in best ball is you either want 2 or 3. Don't ever take 4. The data has shown that it's actually a negative in terms of your outlook of success. So either 2 or 3. If you take someone super early, let's say it's a Josh Allen, a Kyler Murray, a Patrick Mahomes, if you get Fitz as your quarterback 2, that is just immense upside at quarterback every single week to get 2 guys that any given week can finish as the quarterback 1. Absolutely love that pairing there. So yes, if I'm going quarterback early, for me, it's Fitz as my QB2. Absolutely.
So don't hear what I'm not saying. I love Fitz. If you go on our website, 25 Ryan Fitzpatrick facts to change your life or to make you rethink your life.
Best article of the offseason.
I've spent a lot of time on this man, and I respect him. His playing style does scare me. He hasn't played a full season since 2011 with the Jets. And part of that's been circumstances. Part of that is like he probably should have kept playing last year, but then Tua took over. So I don't want to just stay on just that stat, but his playing style is reckless. And he's been known, and he's at the point of his career where he's just like, screw it, I'm just going to run the ball. So I'm not like saying don't ever draft him, but he's in my rankings right now at QB 26, and I'm much lower. Like, I look across the board. The Ballers have him at 22. Underdog has him at 21. You're the highest at 19. So I get it. I totally understand the upside, and I like the weapons as well. And I like that the weapons you can get him at cheaper prices. So I'm not saying don't get Fitz at his price tag, but I probably won't have him on as many stacks this year. And I feel okay with that because there are a lot of quarterbacks in that range, but I appreciate Ryan Joseph Fitzpatrick. Speaking of Joseph Lee Burrow and Betz, this is going to be a theme. I'm a big fan of middle names when it comes to NFL players. So you're going to be hearing me spitting fire about every single one of these players, and their families that are listening are going to say thank you for pointing that out.
It's a huge part of their life, so we have to honor it.
I know. Have we discussed your middle name on this podcast before?
We haven't, and we probably won't. I'm not sure. Are we going to do it?
I mean, you don't have to. I will. I'm as bare-chested as Ryan Fitzpatrick could be in proclaiming my middle name.
All right. What's yours? Then I'll say mine.
My middle name is Houston, which is actually my son's name. So I feel pretty excited. Houston was actually my grandmother's maiden name. So it's pretty important.
That's a big
name.
deal.
I know. And I feel good about it, but you don't have to.
That's a big
yours.
deal. Mine is Douglas, my dad's name.
Now I got to call you Dougie.
That's all there is to it.
Let's go back to Joseph Lee Burrow. Yeah, Joe Burrow. And right now in Underdog ADP, he's going 91st overall. He's the quarterback 9 Betz. That's expensive. Quarterback 9 territory for a guy coming off of multiple injuries is not something I feel comfortable with. I know we just got the news recently that he's supposed to be fine for week 1. I don't buy that at all. So tell me on the injury front, am I crazy to think that Joe Burrow is not going to be ready week 1?
So there's such a big gap in terms of the term ready for week 1 versus is this player back to full strength at 100%. And that's the issue that I kind of, oftentimes talk about or write about on the show, on the the website or in the UDK. Like the Joe Burrow breakdown is in there fully. If you bought the Ultimate Draft Kit, it's in there. But basically the idea is he'll probably be active week 1. He'll probably start week 1. I do not doubt that at all. But you're talking about a player who's coming off of a November injury for an ACL, MCL, and additional damage inside the knee joint. We just know that basically means cartilage or meniscus, and those take a lot longer to get a player back to full strength because the rehab is slow. You kind of have to protect it. It just heals slower than the other components there. So, yeah, I don't think Joe Burrow is 100% week 1. I highly doubt he's 100% week 1. Now, with that being said, is he going to play? I do think he will. It's just a matter of what does that mean for fantasy, and maybe that can kind of be your talking point here. You're lower, obviously. I am too relative to ADP, but what's your thought there in terms of where he's going to be relative to 100%?
Yeah, I think it's, I get the temptation with Burrow. He has rushing upside. He has some exciting young weapons that we like, in Higgins, Boyd, and Jamar Chase. We like Joe Mixon. He's got nothing at tight end. He's got a stool sample at tight end, Drew Sample. So the reality is, I think that this has elevated him to a price where I just don't see it. I just can't see him finishing there. Not only due to his injury, but his playing style. I mentioned this in his draft profile when he came in the league. He's actually a little reckless when he runs. And that's the kind of thing that sets you up. He didn't have big hits in college. And when he did sustain one, against Washington, he was out for the whole year. So that scares me a little bit. He also was really poor on deep throws, atrociously poor in terms of connecting with AJ Green, T Higgins. You look at their metrics in terms of 20+ yard attempts, it's terrible. So I think you're having to buy him at a place where he has to return value. I think he's more of QB 12 to 16 or 17. And I feel comfortable there. But my question for you, Betz, is if I'm out on Burrow at his current price tag, does that mean that I should probably be more out on these receivers in terms of best ball for Cincinnati?
I don't necessarily think you have to be out on all of them. I certainly wouldn't go Bengals stack if that's the case, because obviously for this to work, you need Joe Burrow as a part of it, unless you're looking at an offense that you really trust to be prolific for fantasy. And this is kind of the misnomer out there in DFS Best Ball world. Everyone knows about stacking, or most people do at this point. But there's this idea that you have to stack the quarterback always with the wide receiver. But in best ball, you're basically making a forecasting type of move to say, this year, I think this team is going to have a great year. Let's say, just because we never talk about this team, let's talk about the Falcons. I think the Falcons are going to have a great year this year. Well, if you miss out on Matt Ryan, but you still have Kyle Pitts and you still have Calvin Ridley and you got Mike Davis, like if the team gets there, those players will get there in the end because you have a bigger sample. So I do think that there's still some value in these Cincinnati pass catchers, even if you don't go full Bengals stack. But given that I expect Joe Burrow coming off this knee injury to not run the ball as much as maybe he has in the past, I do think that limits their downside a little bit when you talk about the overall ability to reach their full ceiling with Joe Burrow. Because if he doesn't run, we need the wide receivers there to kind of elevate him a little bit. So yeah, it's an interesting point. I haven't really thought about that too much, but I will say, just looking at his ADP over the last 4 or 5, 6 weeks, you recall you and I did a Best Ball Mania draft together about a month ago. I went full Bengals stack because there was so much value. And now every single one of those guys is up at least 3, 4, 5, 6 spots in ADP. And I'm starting to get to a point where I'm like, I don't know that it makes sense anymore. So I think that's why there's value in drafting early, because you can get some values and then you can kind of go, you know what, now it's past the point, I'm hands off.
That's a great point, because when we're talking about these stacks, it really does depend on when you draft. Like if you were drafting Burrow, maybe you got him Betz. I mean, we could have to look back at your draft, like at QB 15, which is where I have him ranked. I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. But right now at QB 9, like that's just too expensive for me. So no thank you on Burrow. And, you know, the thing about this Bengals team is, are they going to win 6 games? Like that's kind of where we had their line. I think they were 6.5. Like we were kind of saying in our win totals pod, like, I don't know about it. There's a quote with Zach Taylor recently where he said, "We're now a team on a mission." I was like, what the heck are you guys doing for the last 2 years then? Like, he's just yet to prove that he's anything special. Like so far, they've basically been running 3 wide receivers and it hasn't worked out. So I'm not against the Bengals. They're a fun team. I think we'll be talking about them in DFS because that's a different way to approach them. But Joe Burrow as a whole, I'm out on quarterback. Let's move to running back. And I actually really like your take here. Give me a running back that you see some discrepancy.
All right, man. Listen, the hate has gone too far. Ezekiel Elliott is going off as most people's, let's say like running back 6 to 10, somewhere in that range is what I've seen across the industry. His ADP is at 9 right now on Underdog as the running back 7. You're talking about a player. And this is what I love about our website, thefantasyfootballers.com. Kyle, perhaps you've heard of it. Looking at the consistency charts, you're looking at a player who finishes the running back 11, 4, 5, 10, and 2 since he entered the league in 2016. And now, you know, just a year removed from just the fallout of Dak and the Cowboys being a bad offense while having an immense number of injuries on the offensive line. Just a year ago, you rewind 12 months, he's going as the running back 1, 2, 3, or 4 in every single draft. And now nothing has changed on offense. And all of a sudden, he's a back half of the first round type of guy. Sometimes I've seen him in round 2, early round 2 drafts. It doesn't make any sense for a player that you know is going to touch the ball a ton on an offense that we like and that Dallas projects to be pretty good, because here's the newsflash, the defense is still bad despite spending a first round pick on Micah Parsons. So yeah, to me, the hate's gone too far with Zeke. You know, I've been pretty vocal in general about, like, in Dynasty, there's a little worry, you know, is he going to be there long term? I don't know, but they're committed to him this year. He's going to get a ton of touches. The offensive line's back, Dak's back. So to me, seeing him at running back 7 is massive value.
Yeah, I just think that you're right. The hate has gone too far. You have him at running back 4. I have him at running back 6, which I thought when I made my rankings and I compared them to ADP, I thought I was high on him, Betz, but you are actually by far the highest. Ballers have him at running back 7. So I think what you're saying is if you can get Zeke ahead of ADP, that's okay. Like, it's totally okay in the first round if you take him, you know, a couple spots ahead of ADP. You also will have a different construction of a lineup from other people who are kind of waiting on Zeke. And a lot of people are basically saying, I don't want Zeke, I want Dak and the pass catchers. So if you want to get a little different, I think that's a good way to stack it. So I'm fine with that. Do we know anything about offensive line health or just Zeke in general? Like, he's not that old. Like, he's 25 years old. We shouldn't be worried about him injury-wise.
No, he's been a guy who's just been insanely durable and productive, obviously, through his time in the NFL. Going back to, you know, his 5 seasons here, he's averaging 24.3 touches per game. And again, we're talking touches, not just rush attempts. He gets the ball out of the backfield. So yeah, nothing in his injury history worries me. He had a mild hamstring issue last year. He was also on the COVID list before the season started. And, you'll hear players talk about that, like that affected them for several weeks. We heard it with Cam Newton last year, for example. So yeah, there's a lot to like about the bounce back appeal of Zeke. And then, yeah, you look at the offensive line, they lost Zach Martin. They had Lyle Collins. Who's the right tackle? He's slipping my mind right now.
Collins played right tackle for a lot of it, and then Tyron Smith played left.
Tyron Smith, thank you. Yes. All those guys are back, and yes, they are getting a little bit older. They're veterans, but they're all injuries that sort of seem to be more of a one and done situation. So it gives me more confidence that I do think this Dallas offense really can get going here in 2021.
Yeah, I like Zeke, and we had a discussion earlier. Shout out to our Fantasy Footballers writing staff. We had a call right before this podcast we recorded where we talked about different tiers. And I think, Betz, you said, I don't mind putting Zeke in one of the top 2 tiers. I think right now it's kind of CMC and Dalvin in the top tier. But you said, I don't mind if in that next group it's Kamara, it's Saquon, and it's Zeke. Is that how you're seeing it?
For sure. Yeah. The thing with this, ADP right now is it almost feels like you're drafting Zeke unless, and obviously all this stuff is caveat. If he gets hurt, well, okay, obviously that's not right. But it almost feels like you're drafting him at his floor. If he plays 15 games, it's a 17-game season. Let's say he misses 1 or 2. How, with this offense and how much work he gets, how does he not finish inside those, top 4, 5, 6 running backs? It just, to me, is a player I really want to be high on in best ball, and obviously take a stance early to make sure I get a ton of shares of him in my best ball drafts.
What's funny about Zeke is in Dynasty, it feels like you're supposed to be on the way out with him. But in redraft, I think 2021 is still a year where you can do that. So it's kind of funny to think about a player and depending on what format, best ball, redraft, Dynasty, we're going to be talking about DFS, obviously, on this podcast. Zeke's all over the place for a lot of people, but I think he's still valuable. So moving from Ezekiel Elijah Elliott, so he's got 3 E's. I don't know if you knew that about his name. I want to move to a player, Betz, that, boy, does he have a name. And most people don't know this. Algiers Jamaal Dillon. I'm talking about AJ Dillon. Did you know that was his first name?
I did not, but it is phenomenal.
I feel like people need to know this about AJ Dillon. First off, I just want to say that his thighs, they are real and they are spectacular. They're beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Did you see the most recent picture?
I did, with him and Aaron Jones.
Yes. His thighs are so big. He has a wedgie and he doesn't even know what to do with it. Literally his shorts are just engulfed in his butt because his thighs are so big, man. Quadzilla. Oh my gosh. How can you not like this guy?
Does he know how popular he is on Twitter? And in terms of I've never heard him speak a word. I haven't heard an interview, but a part of his body is popular on Twitter. Does he understand that?
That's when you know you made it.
Yeah. If someone's man, Kyle's nose, whew, we're going to be talking about, no one's going to be talking about that. I do have a big schnoz, by the way. So let's talk about AJ Dillon. So you and I, dude, I think are really high on AJ Dillon, extremely high on him. Right now we have him at RB 31, and that's for best ball. So be clear. This is best ball where you're trying to get first. You're going Ricky Bobby. You're either first or you're last. That's what we're trying to preach here. And that is a lot more ahead of where Underdog ADP is, RB 39. On the Ballers redraft rankings, he's RB 43. Betz, are we crazy for liking this guy this much?
I don't think so. And again, it's a huge distinction. I would not take him at this ADP or this ranking rather in a redraft league. So you need to be very, very clear about that. In best ball, like you said, you're basically taking AJ Dillon or Algiers Jamaal Dillon as a way to basically say okay, if something happens to Aaron Jones, I have a top, what would you say, maybe 15 running back, and you're going to get him way, way later. So there's so much upside in taking him above ADP that if anything happens, you have this guy, and he fits kind of that 0 RB build. If you're not familiar, basically just means that you're forgoing some of the top, heavy running back builds to get these value picks later and kind of hope that things fall apart. Because when you look at the way to kind of get different in these best ball tournaments is to sort of just take a different approach than maybe other drafters. one way to do that is to pass on Aaron Jones and to really invest here in AJ Dillon in the event something happens. But let's be honest, right? Like we talked about it last year. I remember a lot with like Jamison Crowder and guys like that are just more like, they're going to get you points. In these tournaments, you have to get to the finish line for it to even matter. This backfield is not going to be Aaron Jones 90% of the work. It is going to be a split backfield. Now, is AJ Dillon going to catch the football? I'm not sure. I would obviously love to see that. But, Aaron Jones is just so efficient. He just hasn't done it on a ton of touches. So AJ Dillon is going to play a lot for this team. And assuming Aaron Rodgers is back with this team, which I think he will be, then you're going to get AJ Dillon here above consensus. And I think come season's end, you might be happy about it because he could fall in the end zone, 8 to 10 times. And all of a sudden, he's a valuable RB2/3 for your best ball team.
And that's what you hit the nail on the head. Like for redraft, please do not draft AJ Dillon where we're saying, but we're saying we want you to get them above the ADP. Right now he's going at a pick 110 in Underdog ADP. So he's like 9th, 10th round. And I think that's fine. I think that's actually fine in redraft. Like if you wanted to go there, but you're not planning on starting him in redraft. In best ball, you're hoping that he's your RB3 or 4 that can kind of propel you in a way. And basically, we've talked about best ball builds, and we'll talk about this with our strategies. We'll talk about some roster construction. But for fragile builds in best ball, you want maybe 4 running backs bets, maybe 5?
Yeah, like if you're thinking about going RB heavy, which is I think what you're describing, you're basically saying like, when I invest this much draft capital early in my draft in running backs, I'm banking on these studs being my RB1 and RB2 to get me through and just hope they stay healthy. That's basically what you're saying. And in that sort of situation, you don't want to invest a lot into running backs. You want to take, 2 studs, maybe 3 studs, and then like a value pick later, or just go 4 studs and then, wide receivers, etc. So yeah, you're basically saying 5 max for that strategy. I've kind of capped it at 4 personally, but I think 5 is okay depending on the players you get.
I think AJ Dillon is one of my favorite picks in best ball this year because he really is a first or worse. Like that's the kind of player that you're getting. And I know that like you can spin a narrative for so many different players, and especially backups like Alexander Mattison, Tony Pollard. I just think Dillon is built for this team to be able to use. And I'm not projecting injury for Aaron Jones by any means, but I just like Dillon. I like what we saw. We in week 16 against Tennessee, he went for 124-2. Like we've seen a glimpse of this guy be able to do it at the NFL level. And he's about as close as you can get to Derrick Henry. Like I wouldn't call him Derrick Henry light, but he's like, I don't know, 70%, 75% of Derrick Henry, which is just, he's an outlier of a player. So that's as close as you're going to get. And I just like him. He's an RB4 that I'm getting in some of my drafts. And so I'd encourage you, if you wanted to get him ahead of ADP around, I think that's smart. And for Best Ball Mania in particular, the tournaments Betz and I have been playing, I think he's a great pick. So let's go with a wide receiver next. And Betz, I know, you've been thinking about this guy and thinking about his full name, but I just want to make sure the audience knows that Deebo Samuel is actually Tyshun Raekwon Deebo Samuel. His father actually named him Deebo after the movie Friday, next Friday. For those of you listening at home, like that's where it came from. So tell me about Deebo.
Come for the DFS/best ball talk. Stay for the middle names. What a name. Yeah, for me, dude, Deebo, I don't really know where to put him in terms of where I see him being a like end of season looking back. You could tell me like this guy had an awesome year. He finished as the wide receiver 25. He was really usable in fantasy. Your best ball teams liked having him. And you could tell me a story where he's like wide receiver 50 and I'm like, I really wish I didn't have him on my team. And my ranking reflects that side of things because for me, looking at his rank, which actually we're together on here on the ranks, I have him at 43 as you do. And then you look at the ballers, they're at 32. Underdog ADP is going at pick 78. Like if Trey Lance starts a lot of football games for this team, which you look at the data, you look at the history of quarterbacks taken in the top 10 of the NFL draft, clearly Trey Lance at number 3, those guys play in year 1. Trey Lance ran for 1,100 yards in college, in a college season. Now, is he going to be the same player in the NFL? We don't know. But if he is, like, how is there enough volume to go around for Deebo, for Ayuk, who people love, for George Kittle, who's going as the tight end, I think 3, if I remember correctly, or 2, depending on where you have him in your ranks. Like, he just can't support all 3. And we've seen that with rushing quarterbacks. Look at Lamar Jackson. He supported Mark Andrews, but not Hollywood Brown. Jalen Hurts last year didn't really support any wide receiver in his starts, like those types of guys. So to me, like, Debo is he's such an enigma that he's a fun player to root for, but I'm lower than consensus in best ball because I just don't know that he really fits the type of player that I want at wide receiver. Like, I want those huge spike weeks where you're going to get 3 to 5 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Debo does not have that in his game because of the way that they use him around the line of scrimmage. So love him. Super fun player to root for. More interested in redraft than in best ball. But yeah, at his ADP, I think I'm out on Debo this year, which is kind of unfortunate.
I think that's the right take. It's a difference between redraft and best ball because you can replace a player in redraft. If you're getting Debo at, let's say, wide receiver, the ballers have him at wide receiver 32. That's fine. I don't mind that in terms of rankings, but you can replace that. You can't do that in best ball. And so you and I are much lower right now. You mentioned he's going at pick 78. I have him at 116 bets. So like a full 4 rounds later. Is that crazy?
Get wrecked, Debo. Sorry, man.
I can't do it. And I think with Lance, best case scenario, like he has a crazy rookie season. He sets records. I think what's actually more in the medium projection bets is that Garoppolo starts a couple games. Maybe Lance comes in weeks 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know, somewhere around there. And then he has like a Cam Newton-esque season. Like it's kind of like he has a season like what we saw last year where the passing volume's low. They run the ball a ton because they're really good at it. Their defense is good. And then you don't have any wide receivers. Like the Patriots had the lowest amount of wide receiver fantasy points in the NFL last year. And I'm not projecting that for the Niners, but between Ayuk and Debo, they're just not 2 players that I'm really, clicking that much in best ball. So I just feel like it's just not somewhere I want. And then we didn't even see Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle play that much together last year.
Yeah, just 4 games all year with all 3 of those guys were on the field. Debo's finishes in those games, wide receiver 41, wide receiver 78. He had a wide receiver 14 finish, which was great, and then wide receiver 41. It's a small sample size, so we don't really know how it's going to turn out, but it gives you zero confidence in their ability to support all of these players with consistency. So I guess my question for you, Kyle, is like, if you disagree with us, which is fine, let us know your thoughts. Reach out to us on Twitter. Let us know. But if you're in on Debo, like, are you out on Ayuk? Are you out on Kittle too? Because like I feel like you can't make a triple stack or a double stack with this team because we just know that they kind of like eat into each other. Is that how you're approaching the Niners?
Yeah, I think that's the main thought is that Lance is an intriguing piece. Don't get me wrong. Like Lance is one of those players that if you got as your quarterback 2, he has a rushing upside. We've preached that about whoever your quarterback is late. If they have legs, if it's a Fields, if it's Lance, if it's even, I don't know, Daniel Jones, like at least these quarterbacks can run the ball. That's what you want in terms of best ball. But yeah, I can't really fully stack this team because they rely so much on the run and rely on their defense. Like they had the 3rd most combined running back fantasy points last year. That's crazy considering like Mostert was hurt, Wilson was hurt, Tevin Coleman was like, it was just a revolving door at running back. And that's just kind of like what they're good at. And so I respect the Niners. I think they're going to be a good team, but for fantasy purposes and for best ball purposes, I just don't see the same spike weeks that you mentioned. So yeah, I'm out on Debo. And like, I probably won't have him anywhere.
Me too. I just traded my only share of him in Dynasty as well.
I like him as a player, but like, It wouldn't shock me. And just clarify, in terms of injury, he's not injury prone, but he plays in a way that's asking for injuries.
It's piling up too, like the last year was kind of tricky because he had the fractured foot, the Jones fracture in the summer. So like entering week 1, you just knew like he would never really be himself. And he missed a couple of games actually to start the year, picked up the hamstring issue, aggravated it. So like, I definitely think there's a scenario where Debo comes back and plays close to a full season, or at least like, 13, 14 games, that sort of thing. So don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not out on Debo as a player. I think he can still provide value in your redraft leagues. But yeah, for best ball, I don't see the ceiling that I want. Again, in best ball, we're trying to win first place. There is no such thing as like getting third and being happy about it. So Debo to me doesn't have that sort of ceiling that you need to go Ricky Bobby style and go, if you ain't first, you're last.
So Debo is picked in the early second round of the draft. I'm going to go with another player, Betz, that was also drafted towards the beginning of the second round. I'm going to go with Michael K. Pittman. And I'm just going to say I spent a lot of time searching for Michael Pittman's middle name on Google.
I can't believe you're getting paid to do this.
This is my job. If you guys want to hit me up, I do have a really sweet Google Doc that has a lot of players' middle names in the NFL, and it's one of my true shining examples of being employed by the fantasy footballers. Because AJ Dillon was Algiers Jamal Dillon, but AJ Green is very different. Like it's Adriel Jeremiah Green. I mean, those are different names. Yeah. But the only reason why I could actually stick in a letter is because we know Michael Pittman Sr.'s middle name starts with a K. But he used to play for the Bucks. You know, he's a running back. But anyway, his son, Michael K. Pittman Jr., I'm actually pretty bullish on him this year. And right now, I'm probably insanely high. I have him at wide receiver 36. So he's a wide receiver 3, in my opinion, in terms of best ball. And I've had a lot of shares of him. It's way above ADP. It's way above the Ballers consensus. You have him at wide receiver 41, which is a bit more tempered than I think maybe I am. So Michael Pittman, it's about opportunity and it's about the intangibles of what could he be. And I think a lot of people aren't looking at that right now. A lot of people are down on Carson Wentz, and I totally understand. You as an Eagles fan can totally, relate. But Michael Pittman could be the number one in this offense, and could he be a top 36 wide receiver? What do you think?
Is it in the range of outcomes? Yes, definitely. Is it likely? I don't think so. But again, it's not that you can't really see the scenario. Like you can see the path, right? T.Y. Hilton last year was one of the biggest fades in fantasy for a reason for me. And it's because he's an aging player with a history of multiple soft tissue injuries over and over again for the last 3-4 seasons. And he's coming back, but like, what does he have left in the tank? I'm not sure. I think he probably helps the Colts more than our fantasy rosters or our best ball rosters. But you're looking at a situation where if he can actually get to that ceiling, it's because Carson Wentz is still actually a good quarterback. And last year was just a fluke, which, gosh, that was so rough to watch. But he's going to a situation where he gets out of that big media market in Philly. He goes to Indy. He goes back with Frank Reich, a system he's familiar with that really does emphasize getting the ball out of the hands of the quarterback quickly, which if you watch Carson Wentz last year, when he held onto the ball, oh my gosh, that was rough. So I think Carson Wentz could actually bounce back here, and there's no one that's stacking these guys to create leverage and be different in these tournaments that's not named Kyle in your draft. So I think there's some value in being different. I'm a little more tempered in that just because, there is risk. Undoubtedly, there is risk with Michael Pittman, with the entire offense, and the fact that we just know Carson Wentz could play 3 games and they could be like, all right, man, yeah, you're out, dude. Like, you're done. So there's some risks there, but I definitely see your argument in terms of, he has the ceiling to get there, especially if you believe he can take a step forward here in year 2.
Yeah, and just hear me out. Wide receiver 36 isn't like, I'm not saying he's going to blow the doors off. Like, I'm not asking for like a 1,200-yard season. I am asking for Michael Pittman to be the number 1 in Indianapolis. And he's just different than other wide receivers. Like, he's 6'4". That's very different than T.Y. Hilton. It's very different than Paris Campbell. That's different than Zach Pascal. Like, he's just has a different skill set. And so, I think he's just in a position where I can get him on a lot of my teams. He's going at pick 103 on Underdog. So I can get him. I've got him in a lot of drafts as my wide receiver 4. I even got him as a wide receiver 5 somewhere. So I'm not asking him to like totally perform for my team. I'm not counting on him, but I think he's in a position where if he does outperform his ADP, I think I have a leg up on the competition. And I have stacked him with Wentz. Like, Wentz is going so late. He's in the Daniel Jones category. And last year, through the first 6 weeks of the season, he was like a top 10 quarterback. So don't just think like everything went wrong. Like, it was fine for fantasy. For real life NFL, the Eagles were a disaster. You guys were a disaster, Betz. But
thank you very much for pointing that out. That was fun. And I will just piggyback on that really quick. We talked about this a lot that division is horrific. You're talking about 2 games against the Texans, 2 games against the Jaguars defense. The Tennessee Titans had a bottom 5 defense in every category last year. So he's getting 6 games this year against cake matchups, presumably. Obviously, things can change, but presumably against bad defenses. And the offensive line in Philly was so banged up last year. Now he goes to one of the best offensive lines in football. You can tell yourself a story for sure.
Yeah, and Pittman, I don't know if you guys remember this, but last year, the last time we saw him was against the Bills in the playoffs. He went for over 100 yards. He was awesome. I remember playing him in DFS. Yeah, Michael Pittman. So maybe that's weighing a lot on my mind, but at his ADP, I will be above the consensus. So last position here, Betz, and I like both of the guys we're going to talk about here. I mean, this is a fun category because I think a lot of people approach best ball and say, oh, I got to get Kelsey, Kittle, Waller. And then after that, what do? So these are 2 candidates that you and I are actually a little bit more bullish on. And give me the guy that you want to talk about.
Oh, I'm getting hot and bothered just thinking about this. I am in on Tyler Higbee this year, and you and I are in lockstep here at tight end 7 in the ranks. He is currently going as tight end 10. So I feel like that's a tight end. Like you can't get that different later in like the tight end 1s, but I feel like that's kind of an aggressive ranking on Higbee to make sure that the DFS Pass subscribers get him on your roster because here's the scenario. Gerald Everett, if you recall last year during the season, Mount Everett, as Kyle said, Gerald Everett is out of town. He is now playing with a massive upgrade at quarterback. We're getting Matthew Stafford in. I really feel like we're going to see just this Rams offense unleash because Sean McVay had to keep the training wheels on for Jared Goff. Right? You hear the stories like he's changing the play for him at the line of scrimmage. He's dictating everything. He's just giving him layup throws. Matthew Stafford is such an underrated quarterback, and now he's getting Tyler Higbee, who we've seen him have success, with T.J. Hawkins in Detroit, etc. Eric Ebron, kind of. But really, it's the excitement about the fact that Gerald Everett isn't there. It's presumably going to be a really good offense. And you look at, in this range, again, I don't care about finishing 4th. I want to finish 1st. There is not a tight end that's going in this range that has the massive upside that we saw from Tyler Higbee 2 years ago. Listen to these stat lines, if you guys recall, those last couple games down the stretch without Gerald Everett in the lineup. 7 catches, 107 yards, 1 touchdown. 7 catches, 116. 12 catches, 111. 9, 104. 8 for 84 and a touchdown. That all happened in consecutive weeks. You're looking for a player in this range who can break the mold of the late round tight end and become the tight end 2 or 3 in fantasy. There's no one in this list that goes around him that can do it outside of Tyler Higbee. So I want to be higher on him than consensus to make sure I get a few shares of him on my rosters this year.
Higbee is going to be an every down player. And we think about him as being this pass catching, kind of more PPR guy because he had that crazy end of the season, like you mentioned. The dude can block. He's going to be on the field all the time. And as you mentioned, with Gerald Everett out, it's a very clear path. Last year, that was the conversation before the season. Like, is that, 5-game sample size, is that real? And he had a 3 touchdown game in week 2. And then from then on, he was basically a tease. But he's a good player. He knows how to get open. He's on a good offense. And I really like him. Like you said, at his ADP, I think you can get him on a lot of teams. You and I are ahead of consensus at tight end 7. So in terms of your builds, Betz, is he one of those players where if you get Kelsey, Kittle, like, don't go for Higbee? Or is he like, fine, if you're shooting for the moon and you wait on tight end, can you get him as your tight end 1?
I prefer to go with the second option of what you presented. Yeah, if you're taking someone in the first couple of rounds, Kelsey, Waller, Kittle, etc., you're counting on those guys to be your tight end scorer every single week throughout the entire season. Now, when you look at the probability, are there going to be weeks where Higbee outscores Kelsey? Sure. Is there going to be a lot of weeks? Very unlikely, right? So like if you take both those guys, it's almost like you wasted a draft pick, assuming Kelsey stays healthy, which is what this is all about. If he stays healthy, there's not going to be a tight end that outscores him, in my opinion. So if you're taking Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, those guys, I probably would not take Higbee. To me, I prefer him in those 3 tight end builds. We were getting a mid-tier guy like Higbee and then just kind of getting some late guys. I'm trying to think of a couple of names off the top of my head, maybe like a Mike Gesicki, who's a high upside guy, Gerald Everett, like we talked about, or the player you're going to talk about next.
Well, I mean, I feel like this player needs a really really fire intro because he is one smooth guy. He is one that the ladies have been talking about for years. I mean, everybody's got this guy's jersey. If you haven't bought 100%. This guy's, if you haven't bought an Anthony Paul Firkser jersey, what are you doing with your life?
Is that on Pristine Auction? It's got to be.
All I know is, did you know that he went to Harvard? That's right. Anthony Firkser is the smartest tight end alive, except for Cameron Brate, who also went to Harvard. But let's talk about Anthony Firkser, okay? So just whatever you're doing right now, if you got your coffee in the morning, if you're on the toilet, you're already relaxed. This is the part of the podcast that when you're listening to, you need to say to yourself, wow, we're talking about a guy who was undrafted. He's on the Titans. Anthony Firkser, the Firk Daddy. Yes, we're talking about the Firk Daddy.
Oh my gosh. Dude, last year it was so fun to play him because he was 3K every week on DraftKings. Just the stone min, you knew you were going to get like 2 for 12 and a touchdown.
Seriously though, Anthony Firkser was basically like 2,500, 3,000, like on DK. It's just like they wouldn't increase his price. But hear me out. Anthony Firkser he plays for the Titans. If you don't know, like
you can't even say that without laughing. How do you expect anyone to take this seriously?
Okay. Anthony Firkser.
Oh my gosh.
We jokingly referred to him as the Titans tight end 1 because Betz from week 5 on, he saw more targets, he had more receptions, and he had more receiving yards, which are all very important for fantasy, than Jonnu Smith. Like, this guy was on the field a ton because they run a ton of 2 tight end sets, and he was actually getting the targets that we wanted. And Tennessee right now, like, who's going to be catching the targets? Obviously, A.J. Brown is the stud we all like. But other than Josh Reynolds, like, there's no one else on the scene that we can think of. Like, even for pass-catching running backs, like, they have no one. It's Darrington Evans, Jeremy McNichols. Like, there's no one behind Derrick Henry. So what if Anthony Paul Firkser is able to scoop up some of the 60% of the vacated targets they have in Tennessee? I think there's a narrative where you can get him on your team as your tight end 2. He can be relevant, and maybe, Betz, just maybe, he turns into this year's Gary Barnidge. Thoughts?
Oh, there are people probably listening who didn't actually play fantasy when Gary Barnidge was actually a thing, which was like, what, 5-6 years ago at this point? Oh, what a time. What a time to be alive.
Gary Barnidge, just so you know, was basically a nobody. I mean, his name sounds like he's like works in a warehouse or an accountant, which if you're a warehouse or an accountant and you listen to our show, we love you. But he's a nobody. He was an undrafted free agent, was on the Browns, and he was basically the beneficiary of tons of opportunity. And that's what we like for Firkser. It's just like there's opportunity in Tennessee for him to see 5 targets a game. Like 5 targets is great for the tight end position. Right now, I have him ranked, Betz, at the tight end 15. You have him at tight end 19, which is fine, but I'm actually pretty bullish on him because for best ball, I think he can enter into that next kind of tier. He can get as high as maybe tight end 6 or 7 if he has a kind of outlier year like Barnidge did. Long live Gary Barnidge. Tell me I'm not crazy.
I can't. No, I'm just kidding. No, listen, like the crux of the argument here is just how many vacated targets there actually are on the Titans. Like, look at the depth chart from last year to this year, and it's just all random dudes. Like, it's AJ Brown and a bunch of guys, and that's why everyone is talking about AJ Brown as like this year's massive breakout, wide receiver 1 season, AJ Brown, et cetera, which I love, don't get me wrong, but it's not all going to go to AJ Brown. Someone else has to catch the football, and you're looking at an offense that we have seen historically use a bunch of 2 tight end sets. So even if he is, let's say, the 1A, 1B type of situation with another tight end there, it could still be a good situation for Anthony Firkser. So I do like the call in terms of him having a lot of value and, being a really nice price in ADP. I guess my thing with him is like, it's pretty much touchdown or bust. I think he's really only going to be fantasy viable and have upside if he's catching the touchdown. But you could say that about every single tight end that's like not the top, 6, 7 in rankings. So I don't know. Maybe I'm talking myself into the Firk Daddy more that we talk.
Yeah, how dare you disrespect a man who, I have to check this out, might have a degree from Harvard. I don't know if he finished. I'm assuming he did. If you go to Harvard, you finish, right?
No, he just went for freshman year, just went for the parties and then dipped.
We actually, just so you know, we hired a writer recently that is starting his PhD at Harvard.
No big deal.
No big deal. So yeah, I just think Ferkser is in that tier of players where I look at tight end 15 through, 25. Which of those guys have the best opportunity? And I think I can tell myself a story where Ferkser is a player that is valuable for best ball. Like he's my tight end 2. I never have to draft him in a position where he's my tight end 1 bets. Like in Underdog ADP, he's going at 139. So you're getting him in the 12th round. And I think that's a position where I'm okay with that. Let's say if you did Kelsey and Ferk Daddy, are you rolling?
You might as well quit your job at that point because you're guaranteed to win it all. Yeah, that's actually a really nice combo because like you're saying, when you're taking him at the ADP, assuming you have a stud tight end already, you're not relying on Anthony Ferkser. Like if he has a few like 2 touchdown games, you're throwing money in the air. You're having a great week. You don't need him to be, a tight end 5 in fantasy. So I think that's if I'm going to roster Anthony Ferkser, that's the strategy that I want. I want him as that tight end 2 behind a stud.
Yeah, and if you do win the Best Ball Mania, if you do win that cool $1 million, please buy an Anthony Paul Ferkser jersey so that you can be the only person on the planet that does have that.
I'm going to send you one for Christmas this year.
That will you buy me one if you win the Best Ball Mania? I don't even care if he's not on your roster. You have to buy me one.
We're putting this on the airwaves right now. Yes, I absolutely will.
Okay, good. I'm glad that there's nothing on my side. It's just if you win, I get something.
Fair enough.
So those are Betz and I's picks at each position. We have a lot more that we'll include in the Ultimate Draft Kit. We'll actually have a write-up soon in the future where we'll give some of our best ball values, some of our sleepers. So one of the things that people ask a lot about Betz Ball is what do I do at the end of my draft? Like, how do I figure out a way to get different from everyone else? Because right now we know ADP, but what about the players that are not drafted at all? That's how you get different from a huge field. So Betz and I will be talking about some of that. And then we've got some really great shows coming up. So Betz, listen up. Dude, this is what we got coming up for June, which is the summertime. It's a good time, but we'll be talking about best ball strategy. So just some of our takes, some of our tips and general strategy. We'll be talking about our favorite stacks to consider. Mid-June, you and I will be doing a live best ball draft together. And let's just call that one the Best Ball Mania, just so that we can on air declare the team that's going to win us the million.
I love it.
And then at the very end of June, we will talk about best ball tournament winners. So players that we like, that we think, hey, if this player's on your team, here's his ceiling, and here's why we think this is a winner. So hopefully you'll join us for all of June. It's going to be super fun to talk about. But Betz, any last parting words for the faithful listeners?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys sticking with us for what I felt like was kind of off the rails show, but it was a ton of fun, man. Excited to be back to talk best ball all summer. Don't forget the Ultimate Draft Kit. We are cheaper than Netflix. Go get it today.
Yes, have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.